All right, let's get started. Welcome to today's WireMock Live session. My name is Derek, and I'll be stepping in for Ethan today. I work on sales and marketing operations here at WireMock, and I'm excited to be hosting this webinar. WireMock Live is a monthly series where we explore new capabilities and advanced uses of WireMock Cloud. During today's session, Dan, our head of sales engineering and customer success, will demonstrate two exciting new capabilities in WireMock Cloud that will elevate your API development and testing processes. He will showcase how to create mock APIs by importing HAR files and generate OpenAPI contracts directly from live service recordings. Before we dive in, just a quick note, we'll be sending out a recording of this webinar afterwards, so no need to worry if you miss anything. Also, feel free to submit your questions using the Zoom Q&A feature throughout the session. We'll be answering them at the end. And remember, your questions don't have to strictly be about today's topic. If you have any WireMock related questions, we'd love to hear them. Now I'll hand things over to Dan, who will take you through today's demo. Dan, it's all yours.
Excellent. Thank you, Derek. Hello, everybody from the Washington, D.C. area to this spooky edition of WireMock Live, as you can see from our backgrounds. Nothing spooky about the technology today, just a little bit of fun with the month of October here in the States. So today we're going to talk about HAR or HAR file imports into WireMock Cloud, a new capability for getting you going with new mock APIs, as well as an often requested feature for generation of OpenAPI specifications via recording. So let me get my screen shared here, and we'll dive right in. Right. So at this point, you should be seeing a black screen with the WireMock Cloud Train Travel demo. This is a tool available to you all to play around with WireMock Cloud, kind of a demo application, if you will. It's available at train-travel-demo.wiremock.io. And by default, it's going against a mock API that we curate here in WireMock. Of course, you can change this to your own endpoint if you wanted to by simply specifying your mock API's base URL and clicking the change button, which will dynamically start to send the traffic to your mock API rather than the one that we are hosting as WireMock Cloud. So let's talk about HAR file inputs. HAR files are a way of capturing and cataloging the requests that browsers are making to endpoints, usually via AJAX requests. Now, there's a lot of tools out on the market that can also generate HAR files from network traffic and in other ways. Even tools like Postman can output HAR files as well. So I'm going to demonstrate how you can capture a HAR file real briefly here using our train travel demo and just a Chrome browser. So the first thing we'll want to do is in our Chrome browser, go ahead and open up our developer tools. So we'll come to View and we'll open up our developer tools down below. And we're going to concentrate on this particular tab here. Let me go ahead and kill this right here. There we go. And we're going to be on the network tab of developer tools. We're going to have preserve log checked and disable cache checked as well to facilitate this. And right now we don't have any traffic. But at this point, I can start to interface with my web page here, and we'll see that traffic being captured by our developer tools. So let's take a look at my bookings. We can see that I currently have a booking here, and we're seeing that traffic being recorded down below, an XHR type of request with a status code of 200. Let's make a few more examples here. So let's book a trip, and we'll see additional API calls being recorded in our dev tools down below. So I'll select, I'm not even trying to pronounce this city here. I apologize for that. And let's go ahead and also select the Prague main station, and we'll go and select a departure date, maybe of tomorrow. And we'll see our demo application goes and makes another request, API request to the bookings path on our endpoint and retrieves back this particular trip. Let's go ahead and book it, and I'll put in Mike Perovich here, and maybe Mike Perovich has a bicycle. We'll hit the book button. Then we can provide some payment details. I'll book this for my brother. And let's go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And C23 is the CVC number. The expiry date, let's go with December of 29. Just picking some information here, and USA is our country, and we can pay that. And we can see our payment has been submitted as well and captured in our HAR file there. Lastly, we'll come back to my bookings, and now we can see we have an additional booking here as well. So we've captured all this information in our developer pane. We can simply come up to here and choose the download link and be able to save this HAR file that's generated by Chrome Developer Tools to a directory of our choosing. Go ahead and I'll click Save. All right, so we have our HAR file generated. We just used Chrome Developer Tools to do that. Like I said, there's many tools out there that offer the export capability of HAR files. Coming into WireMock Cloud now, I've got a blank style or unstructured style of mock API here. And we'll click on the Import tab, and you'll see in our little message now here that we also support HAR log files. I'll come over to File, we'll choose Import from File, and I'll go and I'll find my file we just downloaded from Chrome Developer Tools, click Open, and boom, we can see our stubs have been created simply by those requests and responses that were captured in that HAR log file. So if we just come down and take a look at the bookings call, we can see that the request and the response are all been configured automatically for us inside of WireMock Cloud. Here's our get on the stations, status code 200, as well as what was observed in Chrome Developer Tools at that point. So as you can see, a very quick and easy way to be able to capture these requests. Maybe you have an internal service that you want to be able to record, and there's no connectivity for the proxy-based recorder that we typically talk about. And you can capture a HAR file using one of many tools. You can now use that as part of the import functionality to get that service mocked very rapidly and quickly. Okay, let's hop over to our second feature we want to talk about today. Also excited about this feature, as this one's been requested by many of our customers before. Oftentimes we have services, internal services, third-party services that aren't quite documented the way we hope they would be documented. Maybe we want to have some OpenAPI specification information for a REST-based service so we can do some type scripting or load that into some code scaffolding tools or SDK generators. Well, we can help you with that now in WireMock Cloud as well. So in this particular mock API, we're now using the OpenAPI or REST style of mock API, which enables our OpenAPI section in the left-hand navigation here. You'll see we're starting out with a blank OpenAPI definition file, and the settings I have enabled are enabling our portal, no validation mode, and we're going to leave the generation turned on for that two-way generation. So an OpenAPI specification change in the document section will modify our stubs, and vice versa. Any update to our stubs will affect the OpenAPI document as defined in the document tab. At this point, let's go ahead and start our recorder. Many of you may have seen that this was disabled, or when you clicked on it, it said it wasn't available yet. Now you'll find in the product that you can successfully start the recorder. And we're just going to use GitHub's API for our demonstration today. So I've started that recorder, and let me pop over into a command prompt here, and we'll issue a few curl commands against the GitHub API. But instead of using the GitHub API FQDN or fully qualified domain name, we're going to use that of our mock API that has the recorder running right now. So we'll ask for all the users from GitHub as one example here. And then let's go ahead and ask for user 1. And let's make one more request here and ask for the repositories. Hopefully I'm spelling that correctly. And then our repositories there. Okay, so we've sent some traffic through our mock API that's in recording mode. I'll come back into WireMock Cloud and stop our recorder. And we'll see that we have successfully created those 3 paths that were observed during the recording. Now, this is the exact functionality that you would have experienced inside of a basic or unstructured or blank style of mock API. But now you also have this in the OpenAPI or REST style of WireMock mock APIs. And when we come into our OpenAPI section now, what was a blank document before has now been auto-documented for us based on that recorded traffic. So we can see this and coming down based on the response file sizes, those examples being baked in, a very lengthy 7,800 and some line OpenAPI specification document has been generated for us. And then we can come over into our public documentation, API documentation, and click on that link and see that our documentation has been updated for us automatically as well. So if we click on the get users, we can see that all described for us. We can send an API request and actually have the mock API respond back to us based on that recorded traffic. Same thing here with our get user ID as well. So hopefully you can see how powerful this can be to help you auto-document those REST-based APIs where you don't have a contract provided to you, or maybe the contract is outdated and you'd like to have that contract generated automatically for use in documentation purposes, or maybe it's even as part of your validation settings and being able to enable validation mode, either hard or soft, to achieve contract testing, as we've talked about in the past, or just ensuring that you're not creating any invalid data scenarios, false positives or false negatives when you go and create additional data scenarios in addition to the ones that you had just recorded. All right, with that, I'm gonna see if we have any questions that have come up during today's demonstration of these 2 new features. Derek, did we have anything that popped up?
Hey, Dan, yes, we do. Thank you for the great demo. Our first question is, if I edit the API spec after I record, will WireMock stay updated?
Absolutely. And the absolutely is caveated, right? So if we come into our OpenAPI specification settings here, and we go and look in our settings, we'll see in the generation section here that we have the capability of turning this 2-way syncing on and off in a few different configurations here. So if we were to update the OpenAPI document, let's see, update the stubs when the OpenAPI document changes, we can see that that's currently enabled. So the answer would be yes. If I come into this document and make any changes to it by typing them in or copying and pasting updates to it, with this first radio button turned on, we would expect that these stubs will be automatically updated for us. We can quickly turn that off as well. It also works in reverse. So if we change the stubs via the stubs configuration screen, we can optionally have WireMock Cloud update the OpenAPI document for us. Great question.
All right, great. We have another question. What does WireMock support other than OpenAPI?
All right. So we can see as part of the import process that we support Swagger and OpenAPI specification documents. Now, OpenAPI specification is just Swagger 3.x. So you can paste in your Swagger OpenAPI specification files for import. You'll also notice that we can take in native Postman collections. So if you export a collection from Postman that contains requests to your API, as well as observed responses or sample responses, WireMock can take that Postman collection and create the stubs like we saw today here. The HAR we covered in detail today, an example of generating a HAR log using from developer tools and then importing that. Of course, HAR is a pretty well-defined standard. So there are many utilities and tools out there that can help you generate those HAR logs for import into WireMock Cloud. And then we have our WireMock JSON importing capability. WireMock JSON is the product of using the export capability that we see here in WireMock Cloud. Right here, our export capability. And then lastly, in our import functionality, we have the WireMock folder format, also called the WireMock OSS or WireMock standalone project folder. So we've talked about this in the past, and you can find this in some of our Academy videos. But when you're using this last one coming from the open source world, if you've persisted your stubs to disk in the WireMock open source world, you'll find those mapping files stored inside of your WireMock project folder in a folder called mappings. So when using this WireMock folder import, you'll want to make sure that you are importing the project folder and not the mappings folder in order for this to work appropriately.
Great. We have a lot more questions coming through. Next, we have, can I record traffic from my laptop or inside my network?
Good question. So, a couple ways to approach that. So, with the capability today that we showed with the HAR log, that's probably going to be your easiest approach with WireMock Cloud. Now, WireMock Cloud is a SaaS service running inside of WireMock Cloud's AWS, area of responsibility. So, in order for recording to work, if we use the recording functionality, the WireMock Cloud AWS account needs to have accessibility to that service. And when we're talking about internal services, we typically don't allow access to internal services from the outside world. So our customers have traditionally solved this by use of an API gateway that fronts their internal services, maybe with some authorization, capabilities on top of that API gateway to allow that traffic in. So that's the way customers have been recording internal services to date. But with the introduction of the HAR file import, you're now able to use any number of tools that are out there in the market and in the open source world to generate that HAR log file. And then you can simply upload that HAR log file into your WireMock Cloud account to simulate or build out that mock API of that internal service. We have one other option that, if interested, there is a utility that we have built that you can run as a Docker container that can work as an internal recording engine, if you will. If you have interest in learning a little bit more about that, I ask that you reach out to us via the normal channels, and we can have a session point you to that tool that you could run as a small Docker container to facilitate the recording of internal APIs and automatic upload of those to your WireMock Cloud account.
Great. We have another question. Do you know about a RASO specification, and will WireMock work on a RASO specification?
That is an excellent question, and one that I can quickly say I am not familiar with the RASO specification right now. So we'll go ahead and take your contact information. Hopefully, I believe we should have that, and we can follow up with you after the fact and give you the insight that we've learned from our product and engineering team on the Erazo specification.
Great. And we have another question. Is there support to reactive API and protocol buffer?
Another great question. One I don't necessarily have an immediate answer for you right now. So again, we'll take that as a follow-up. Apologize for not having an answer for that one live today, but we can certainly follow up with you directly once we chase down that answer from our team. Thanks for the question.
Okay. And question of, can I selectively record a subset of APIs from my stub in case I don't want to generate OpenAPI spec for everything within my stub?
So this is a very good question. So today it really is an all or nothing, right? So every stub that shows up inside of our left-hand panel in the stub list here will be considered and used for building the OpenAPI specification automatically. We have had some requests from customers that they would love the capability to selectively disable certain mock APIs, or after a recording, look at their list of mock API or of paths that have been recorded and decide which ones to ignore from that recording. So these are things that we are considering as we plan for the new year and what we want to bring, enhancements and such. So Suman, this is a great question and piece of feedback. We can certainly take that and register it as a feature request because it sounds quite valuable, and keep everyone updated on how we make progress towards these feature requests like this.
Great. And another question of, what behavior is enabled when selecting the WireMock Cloud option within the security type dropdown on the OpenAPI settings tab?
What behavior is enabled? I'm just reading it again here. What behavior is enabled when selecting the WireMock Cloud option within the security type dropdown on the OpenAPI settings tab? Okay, so let's come into the OpenAPI settings tab. And we see the security type. I think Malenko, you are asking about this particular piece. Great. So when we enable our documentation inside, for a mock API endpoint, we are basically unlocking or opening a route to this particular endpoint here that we showed before. Now, this endpoint is by default open to the world. What you have the capability in the setting that you're seeing here is to turn on security for this particular endpoint. And when we turn on this particular security, now this is telling us that in order to access this URL and this documentation site, the user must be a provisioned WireMock Cloud user. So I'm already logged into my WireMock Cloud. Let's see. And here's things that I usually don't do. Try them for the first time. And we can see, instead of loading that site directly, right, we are being kicked over to an authentication screen asking us to log into our WireMock Cloud account. Now, the version you're seeing here, right, is our base piece. So if I were to try and log in with Dan at wiremock.io and click continue, it's gonna ask me for my password here. If you're an SSO configured user, this would kick you over to your SSO provider or IDP. If you aren't logged in already, asking for your valid credentials there. For me, I can log in with my Google credentials here and start that flow of logging in via SSO before I'm allowed to see that public documentation. So that's exactly what's going on there with that configuration. When we toggle on the security type, today our option is WireMock Cloud. You have to be a valid WireMock Cloud provisioned user in your account in order to access this URL.
All right, looks like we have time for about one more question. And it is, what is soft and hard validation under OpenAPI settings? Can we use an external access token to secure OpenAPI documentation?
So second part of that question of using an external access token to secure the OpenAPI documentation. Today, your option is WireMock Cloud for that security type for this documentation. We don't support OIDC or OpenAPI. I'm sorry, or OpenID Connect styles like you would see inside of our mock API settings. So today your option is this WireMock Cloud. You have to be a provisioned user to access this documentation. Now we do have customers that instead of making use of WireMock's public API documentation, they use this experience and either scrape this information, including the sandbox example that we have and how that works, into their own developer documentation portals. We have many customers that do that with things like Backstage. So that's another option if you wanted to expose documentation similar to this, but have more security controls around it. There was one other question of that. I just need to find it real quick. What is hard and soft validation? That's a great question. I will cover that real quickly. So validation mode allows us to ensure that requests and responses that are coming into our mock API are actually valid per the OpenAPI specification. So I'll demonstrate this very quickly. If I turn on hard validation, and this will be able to demonstrate both hard and validation for us. And we'll see if I can make this this thing work. Let's go with, let's make a request on user one, and we'll use our test requester for this demonstration. Now, if I hit send on this, I get a valid, well, I'm really getting an invalid one right now. We can see that what was actually being returned by this mock API is telling us via hard validation mode that the response that's coming back from this stub is actually invalid per the OpenAPI document that was generated. And what it's actually telling us is that the email address is null, but it's expecting an object in here. So this is showing us that the stub that's created in here is being considered as invalid per the specification file. Now this is not necessarily the best of examples, and I will point you to WireMock Cloud-Academy for a full example on this piece. So if we were to come down into our WireMock Cloud Academy and looking for the specific one here, of course, here we go. It's the very last one on the list. You can find a 3-minute video here that really walks through in detail how this validation mode can be used in a parallel development use case, and even in a full approach for contract testing. So given a contract, we want to ensure requests and responses are valid as per the contract that is supplied in WireMock Cloud. And this works not only with stub responses, but also proxy-based responses. So if we have a live service, we can still use API validation mode to achieve true contract testing, so that the request coming in, as well as response coming back from the live service, is validated against the OpenAPI specification.
All right, great. We have one more question. Dan, do you have time to answer? Seeing that we're at.
Yeah, we can take one more question. Absolutely.
Great, yeah. So the question is, how can I create a reusable WireMock-based library from an OpenAPI specification that has sample responses so other services can use it for testing?
Yeah. Good question. How can we create a user from an open API specification? Okay, so let's go ahead and let me blank out my screen here, or my mock API. Let's see here. Just run a quick API command, and we can see that I've cleared all the stubs out of my mock API. Let's also ensure, no, we're good here. Okay, so we're blank here. We can use our import capability to import any open API or Swagger definition file. So I can import the pet store example here. Very quite lengthy example, right? And an open API specification is a mixed bag, right? Some open API specifications have a lot of examples, some have few examples. So my guidance here would be we take the OpenAPI specification file and we take a look at the paths that are actually of interest to us. And by default, we get some base functionality. So if we take a look at this get user by username, and I'm just going to filter the stubs here, we can see that this specification had both XML and JSON equivalents to it. So let's take a look at this one. This would be the JSON, style of request here. And WireMock has automatically built us a specific example as well as a generic catch-all example. So to answer your question, I would take this import here, and then I would start to build out the data scenarios that are important to me. So maybe I want when the username is equal to Dan Perovich, I would come down here, the username is Dan Perovich, or we can use dynamic response templating as we've demonstrated before to make this more automatic and say this is quest.path.1, right? And then this is Dan, and this is Perovich, right? And I can continue to fill out this information and save it. And then I can clone this again, and maybe we're going to go with, J Pretty, right? And continue to add my data scenarios. We have, other sessions that we've done where we can incorporate data sources. So if we want to extract this information from CSV files using the data sources feature, that's another great way of incorporating large data sets into your mock API so that we don't have to clone copy a whole bunch of these, right? But once I've gone in here and created the data scenarios that are important to me on the paths that I've needed, we can start to share this, right, with other colleagues, right? And what my guidance would be is, we can go ahead and share this with other WireMock users, maybe in a read-only flavor. Maybe go ahead and share this with the QA1 team. So anyone that's a member of the QA1 team will see that this mock API is available when they log in. The other way is actually using an API template. So we can come up here and save this as an API template. And let's say this is WireMock Live. We'll give it a slug, WireMock Live. Of course, you'd want to fill in all this information so your colleagues have that helpful information. So when I create a template in WireMock Cloud, it now becomes a way for someone to stamp out their own personal copy. So if I go and I create a new mock API, and now I come into the template library instead, and I'll just filter to ones that are specific to my account here. If we come down and we go and look for our WireMock Live, the one we just saved, I didn't give it any demo or custom icon to save some time here. But a user can say, create mock API. They'll be able to call it whatever they want, WireMock Live Dan, give it a custom CNAME if they would like to. And when they hit save, they're going to wind up with an exact, mirror copy of what we saved as a template earlier, but now it's hosted at its own private FQDN. So this user can now take what was saved as a golden copy, or what we call a template inside of WireMock Cloud, stamp out their own version of it, and then modify the data scenarios in the way that they need to accomplish the tasks that they have at hand. So hopefully that was helpful there. Again, Academy is a great resource for learning a little bit more about some of these things that we were talking about that were outside the realm of just HAR file imports and recording into OpenAPI specifications. So go ahead and make use of this as much as possible. As always, you have both the website and in-product support chat bubble here. So go ahead, make use of that as much as possible. We're here to help you. We want to hear the good, the bad, and the ugly of your experience with WireMock Cloud. We can only get better if we have all of your feedback and feature requests. So keep them coming.
All right, great. Thank you everybody for the fantastic questions. If anything comes up later, feel free to reach out to us. You can contact dan@wiremock.io or me at Derek, DEREK, @wiremock.io. We're here to help with anything WireMock related. And with that being said, thank you again for joining us today, and be on the lookout for the webinar recording coming to your inbox soon. We hope to see you at the next WireMock Live, and have a great day. Take care.